If we could call the meeting to order. Today is February 18th. This is a regularly scheduled school committee, Wednesday, February 18th. Could we please rise to start the meeting by saluting our flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Conway?
Here.
Mayor Elliott?
Here.
Mr. Gendron?
Here.
Mr. Leary?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
7 present.
7 present. Quorum is clearly present. First order of business. We have a special order of business. This is a special meeting. It's an update on the progress of negotiations immediately following the scheduled school committee meeting. This really should be an executive session. So I entertain a motion to go into executive session following the conclusion of the regularly scheduled agenda, and then from that session we will adjourn into an open session. Motion by Ms. Rossigo, second by Mr. Leary, that we delay that item until take it up at the end of the agenda and then proceed accordingly. Can we have a roll call on that motion?
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mayor Chairman Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
So we'll take that up at the end of the meeting. And by the way, the purpose is public discussion would be detrimental to the position of the city. Moving on to the next section, we have minutes. Approval of the minutes of the regularly scheduled school committee meeting of Wednesday, February 4th. Entertain a motion to approve by Mr. Conway, seconded by Mr. Gendron. Further discussion on the approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
In the opposed, that motion passes. Minutes are adopted. Next item on the agenda, we have permission to enter. Permission to enter on February 18th. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. To United Teen Equality Center Incorporated in the amount of $54,688 to amend the existing contract to continue to supply services to the Alternative Diploma Program that is serving 32 students in grades 10 to 12 who require long-term alternative education setting, including the integration of special education students with non-emotional IEPs, funding provided by the Mass Grad Grant. To the Home for Little Wanderers Incorporated in the amount of $43,711 to provide for the out-of-district tuition costs for 2 students enrolled in receiving services as outlined in the special education IEP, funding provided by special school department budget, special education tuition account. To Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in the amount of $15,000 to provide training to all special education teachers on how to utilize the newly revised Woodcock-Johnson 4. Funding provided by Special Education 274 Program Improvement Grant. To the Candium Voyager Sopris Learning in the amount of $12,800 to provide instructive training to 8 special education teachers in implementing the Language Live pilot program at the Robinson and Daly Schools. Funding provided by the Special Education 274 Program Improvement Grant. To Mill City Grows Incorporated in the amount of $95,000 to provide support and implementation of the learning gardens at numerous schools throughout the Lowell Public Schools. Funding will be provided by various grants, including the Farm to School grant.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Question on permission to enter? I don't have a question, but Madam Superintendent, if Mill City Grows could let the committee know when they have their events at the various schools, I think we'd all be interested in attending some of those, I guess, openings or groundbreakings, if you will, considering it's a really good program. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, I'll be glad to get a calendar of events, Mr. Mayor, and get them out to you.
It looks like they're expanding beyond the just the Slough-Gloucester school this year, and that's a good thing. I'm sorry, were there questions on this? No? Move to approve by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Ross Sikowicz. Roll call.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mayor Elliott,
Yes.
Mr. Gendron,
Yes.
Mr. Leary,
Yes.
Ms. Martin,
Yes.
Ms. Rosikowicz,
Yes.
Ms. Scott.
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Motion approved. So before we move into the next section of the agenda, which we have several motions this evening, entertain a motion to suspend the rules to take one report that will answer some of the motions relative to the school schedule and take the superintendent's report out of order. So if no objection, motion to suspend by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms. Rosikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed, that motion carries. Under reports of the superintendent, take item number 18 out of order. That's a report on the extension of the school calendar year. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are many different ideas about how we can fill the gap of the 8 days that we have been missed school due to the incredibly challenging weather we have had. And so, looking at all of the days that we have had throughout the season, we have looked at all of our calendar, and it will bring us to June 23rd, which is later than we expected. Our original date was going to be June 11th because we did come back those 2 days after vacation and at Christmas, and we did start before Labor Day. So it will be June 23rd, which is later than we're used to, but is something that we've gone much later than that in many years. So that was a recommendation at this particular time, to not look at the calendar and the extra days at this particular point, because we still do have 5 full days until the 30th that is part of the contractual obligation. At the same time, though, I think it's a very good idea because we still are hearing all kinds of future warnings of inclement weather. And so I think that the best thing we can do is some of the suggestions here suggested, which are, what are you going to do about April vacation perhaps? What about Good Friday? Is that we do a quick and very comprehensive survey, get it to our teachers, ask what in fact will happen. Those are religious days. Good Friday is a religious day, and we can plan not to have school, but we really want to have the opinion of our staff, and we also want the opinion of parents, of course. So I'm thinking that by the March 4th meeting, we still have, this is Ash Wednesday, we have 40 days. So we will be, good thing my upbringing can help me here. And we do have some time to come back to our next meeting with more input from our parents, and just to make sure that if we do take a day like Good Friday, that it would be advantageous to our teachers' ability to come to school. So that's what I am thinking at this particular point. I have spoken to UTL President Mr. Georges, Ms. Smith, the president of the LSA, as far as staff, and they thought that was a good idea. But I also think it's getting us ready for a new kind of calendar. It's probably a time to think about when we look at the calendar later. The projected date already for next year is June 22nd. And so if we come into something like this, we'll be in serious trouble. So thinking about a traditional calendar will take a year in advance, and I think we might want to make the move in that area, but also get some input so you can have some options. So that's what I'm recommending at this particular point. I welcome your feedback and any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. I think that'll certainly answer a lot of questions that we have, but knowing that there could be more further discussion on the superintendent's report, we can go right into the motions following any questions or discussion that members may have on her presentation. No, seeing none, so we'll, do we want to entertain a motion to accept this as a report of progress, or, so moved by Ms. Martin, excuse me, second by Ms. Rosikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed, that motion carries. So we'll move right into the motions associated with this. That would be motion number 8 by Ms. Rosikowicz. Request superintendent work with staff to establish feasibility of utilizing April vacation to make up missed days from school due to weather emergencies that otherwise would have extended the school year, and establish protocols for future years if feasibility is established. No objection. We'll take Ms. Scott's motion as well relative to cancellation of school days to make up winter snow days. Motion by Ms. Scott, cancel Good Friday holiday to cancel the Good Friday holiday observation day. Second by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. So on the first motion, we'll take them together, but on the first motion, Ms. Ross-Sikowicz, which was seconded by Ms. Martin. Ms. Ross-Sikowicz.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And actually, the main reason why I brought this forward, it was actually brought forward to all of us, I believe, via email by a parent. So, I think it's important that we certainly entertain suggestions offered by our parents. So often, we're seeking their engagement and we do not get it. And so obviously, when a parent makes this kind of request, I think it's important for us to bring it forward and have this discussion. And actually, just recently, there was a survey that went out through Mass Association, Mass Association of School Committees that actually asked school committee members and other folks across the state as to what their feedback was in terms of, going back to what Superintendent Franco had alluded to earlier, which was sort of looking at our year differently. And I think that, we are faced with inclement weather from year to year, and our calendars doesn't always leave us a lot of room to extend. So I think that looking at our vacations differently certainly should be put on the table, and so that we're not scrambling at the end of every year looking at how to extend our school year or to not, but certainly to establish protocols that are codified, so that we can reflect back on that and fall back on that every year should the occasion arise. Thank you.
For discussion on that motion, Mr. Gendron, and then Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, so I think, first of all, that talking about scheduling school on days where we had vacations planned this year is problematic for a lot of people because there are trips planned, there are vacations planned, people have already made plans around those days, so I think it causes a lot of problems. And if it's not an absolute emergency, my opinion is I think we should avoid it for this school year. However, Ms. Ross-Sikowicz brings up a great point that maybe we should take a look at this on a larger scale for future years. It snows in New England every year, this year more than most, but we're always extending this, or often extending the school year. So maybe we should take another look at it. The suggestion was put out there, should we consider combining our vacations and doing a single break during the spring, doing a single break in March and foregoing the February and April vacations? It makes some sense. If it's a good year, it means everybody gets out of school early. So I think that that's something that really should be thought about. It also lines up well with the sporting calendar. Not that that's our primary drive here, but it's March is right between seasons. Those kids who are athletes get the opportunity to really take their vacation. They don't have to practice through it or go to meets through it. So I really think it's something that we should talk about and think about for upcoming years. But I agree that this year, in case unless we run into an emergency situation, we should probably not pursue that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gendron. Further discussion on this motion? I'm sorry, Mr. Leary.
It's
yes.
okay. Just, I agree with my colleague regarding, I think it's an excellent thing to touch base on and work through. Most states, if you look across the country, they don't have an April, February vacation. Often, especially like, say, a state like North Carolina, where they'll take a week off in March, they'll have an extra week in the December time frame and actually get out of school earlier. So I think discussing it is actually, it's a very good motion to have that. And I think we should be looking at that in our next year's calendar and working with with our employees to ensure that they're in alignment with that. I think it does fit better for the schedule overall. I think doing it now, unless we decide after you go through your dialogue, Madam Superintendent, with the teachers union and then parents, and if we get more snow days, I think we should postpone it till next year. But I do appreciate the motion. I think it's an excellent idea. Most of the states in the union do it. And as Mr. Gendron pointed out, we're going to get snow again. And with our calendar already at June 22nd, this is something that we should probably take a serious look at. Where are the pitfalls? Where are the positives? I mean, the positives are pretty good. You get out earlier if it's a pretty good year. Going to school, even though we're going to June 23rd, it gets hotter, and not all of our schools, the Moody and the Washington don't have air conditioning, so it is a challenge in some of our buildings. So I definitely am in support of discussing it for next year. If we do come into a situation in the next few weeks by our meeting in March, maybe we have to take another look at it, given the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leary.
Mr.
Mr. Conway.
Thank you. Just very quickly, we used to run into this problem quite often, where school would go to the 27th, 28th, and it was always a concern because the teacher's contract was up at the end of that particular month. And what the school committee did back a number of years ago, and I want to say it was perhaps about 20 years ago, they sat down and they changed the schedule so that we ended up going back to school before Labor Day. So that saved us some more time. And at that particular point, we really didn't run into a problem. And I think what precipitated that move was the fact that for 2 or 3 years, there were severe winters that we were out quite a bit. And I think that was obviously a problem. But I do agree with my colleagues. I think by doing anything this year, unless it's a dire emergency, people have made their plans, and I think that we should go back to the table and discuss this in detail, the calendar, and find out what makes sense. And I think that we certainly need to reach out, which I believe the superintendent mentioned, reach out to the parents, reach out to the staff, and let them weigh in on this to see what their thoughts are on it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Ms. Ross-Sigowitz.
Just one more thing. I just have, my concern is how the number of days that our children have been out of class, and my concern is that how does that line up with our MCAS prep? And is that taking away from some of that prep training time for our kids so that they are, primed and ready for MCAS versus the end of the year, which is, not to say that we do it this year, but, in speaking with my own children and other children, at the end of the school year, there's not a heck of a lot going on. There are field trips, they're watching movies, they're doing worksheet packets, there's just not a heck of a lot going on. And I think really with the testing piece is so instrumental, not only to our kids' progress, but to us as a district performance-wise. I think it's really important that we align those pieces so that we're not taking away from that preparatory time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. For further questions, discussion on this motion? So what is the wish to the maker of the motion? Part of this motion does request the superintendent to establish protocols for future years. Madam Superintendent? And I know the superintendent sort of addressed the other part of your motion in her report. So, Madam Superintendent?
Yeah, just to let the committee know that I intend to come back with data next time, so you can really look at that. I will tell you that it has only happened once in 37 years, that's a pretty good run, that the Commissioner of Education decided to let minutes count, so you leave a half hour. That has not been the case. I'm waiting for that to happen any day, because as you may have noticed, some of it was out an entire week because of they're so much more congested than we are, and so there are some places that are past the due date at this particular time. When there could be other options which could come into play for this year, because it is so extreme. When it comes into minutes, then we'll talk about it with all of us. We'll talk together and say what's the best way to do this. That could be one more option that happen. But as of right now, we'll stick with this, and I will bring back a good deal of data. I've talked to the webmaster as far as getting that survey out and getting it out in a context that gets some good feedback. So we'll get that for the next meeting, and that will help us to make any decisions if we're going to change this year. And some good indicators for that calendar for the future.
Mr. General?
Mr. Mayor, I'd just make the suggestion that we forward this motion to the policy subcommittee until such time as we get feedback from the superintendent, and then we can, if action needs to be taken, we can take it up there, if that's okay with the maker of the motion.
So, motion by Mr. Gendron, seconded by Ms. Sigowitz, to refer this, well, part of it will go to the superintendent as well as to the policy subcommittee for report and recommendation pending future weather, I suppose. So I think it's a good idea to send it both of these committees, knowing, as you mentioned, Mr. Gendron, we get in the average in Lowell every year upwards of 66 inches of snow. So it's a recurring process that I think altering the schedule will make some sense. So,
And the future analysis, I mean, I think the policy subcommittee would be a good place to do the analysis as to whether or not we should consider changing our calendar for future years.
mm-hmm. Right. I have to say, I agree with maybe combining these two winter vacations into one. I think that makes an awful lot of sense. I really do. I hope we can strongly consider that. Okay, so on this motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye, or referring it back to the superintendent for report and recommendation, as well as to the policy subcommittee, signify by saying aye. And the opposed, that motion carries. We move on to the next motion relative to school vacation as well by Ms. Scott. Item number 14, that is motion by Ms. Scott to cancel the Good Friday holiday observation day, seconded by Ms. Rosigowitz. Ms. Scott on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry. I also made this motion after hearing from quite a few parents and staff members about their concern about the school year going any further than it is right now. I'm thankful to the superintendent for her report that the year would end right now on the 23rd, and I'm more than willing to hold off on the motion until more days come down the pipeline. We have, a lot of rain coming up. We have more snow in the schedule. So I'm not sure where we're going to end right now, but I did want to put it out there. I know it needs approval from the union. It's a change from a tradition that, what we usually did. So I don't know if we can survey them now, find out, going forward, whether or not they would be on board with this day. It is not a state or a federal holiday, so I do think it is one that we could consider moving. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. I think it makes sense as well. So we refer this to the superintendent as well, so she can have dialogue with members of the union relative to any issues that may come up, as well as to the policy subcommittee. That makes sense to the maker of the motion, yes? Motion by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms. Martin. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye, and the opposed, that motion passes as well. And reverting back to the original agenda. Back to motions. The first motion on the agenda, item number 6, is by Ms. Scott. Request superintendent report on the feasibility and legality of Lowell Public Schools implementing a blizzard bag or virtual school program during snow emergencies. Seconded by Mr. Leary. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This motion is actually a possible solution to some of what we've been speaking about. And it would have to be done, obviously, in collaboration with the teachers' union. I'm sure my colleagues have read and residents have read about the town of Burlington doing a virtual pilot where they're doing this at home. There's also New Hampshire public schools that are doing blizzard bags instead of an online program. They actually have bags prepared with materials to go home, which might be a better solution for a city like Lowell. And I also had heard from parents at Lowell Catholic High School in Bishop Gurdon that said that they do online activities at home on snow days. I don't know what the legalities are with the Department of Education. I know in New Hampshire they have to have 80% participation, and then it counts as a school day. But I just wanted to get a report and see if this is something that we could consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Further discussion on the motion? Mr. Leary.
I think it's a great motion. I think even if it doesn't get credit for school day, it's actually a positive thing, so definitely want to support it. And I think it's similar to another motion earlier tonight. I mean, it's more technical, but both are very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Mr. Gendron.
Yeah, I agree. I think that having kids equipped with work to do on snow days so it doesn't become a complete, let's watch TV all day type of situation, I think is a great idea. Making it count as a school day is another matter altogether, but it's still a good idea.
Thank you. Mr. Gendron. Further discussion on that motion? Nope. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed? Motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Rosigowitz. Request superintendent to work with the proper city departments to facilitate a needs assessment on the adequacy of safety signals surrounding all Lowell Public Schools, seconded by Mr. Conway. Ms. Ross Sikowitz.
Thank you. It's a fairly simple motion. It actually was brought forward by a constituent, and and rather than looking at just one school, and also given the weather and the number of signs, city signage that is down as a result of our plows, I think it's important that we do an assessment on those pieces around our schools to ensure that all safety signals are operational and standing. And if there are any that are lacking, particularly behind schools, not necessarily in front of the front entrance, but say on the back block, say like the Morey School, where that sort of sits on a city block. So just something to put out there. Obviously not something to be done now. Perhaps in the spring, summer, and certainly to, look forward to see what we need in terms of capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross Sikowitz. I think it makes a lot of sense if I can just update perhaps the committee on some of the activity relative to, and the public, measures that the city has taken. We continue with snow removal, certainly in the main thoroughfares, as well as trying to get on the side streets, still trying to plow some side streets. But today I did get on the phone with the Lieutenant Governor, and she called me back in a very short time. And we got on a conference call with the city manager, and as of tomorrow, we'll be having the National Guard come in to do some snow removal. My initial thought, by the way, was to have the National Guard or additional hands come in to start shoveling the roofs of the schools, because that's clearly a concern. I spoke to the superintendent about it as well. But Lieutenant Governor indicated National Guard, they don't do that. They come in, they shovel hydrants, and I think whether it's a liability issue or not, I don't know. However, they will be showing up tomorrow. The Vermont National Guard will be showing up tomorrow to start snow removal activities on the street. And it is our hope that we will be able to utilize our Public Works crew to start getting onto the roofs of the schools. We know some of them are leaking. So that's the plan. So I just want to I did speak to the superintendent earlier about this, and want to let the committee know that we're thinking about the roofs, knowing that rain may be coming, and that becomes a major problem with all the snow on these flat roofs. So we'll see the National Guard and other 10-ton trucks coming into the city tomorrow and Friday. So, Madam Superintendent, do you have anything else on the roofs? So we just want to let you know that the safety of the kids going into these schools, knowing that we have a little bit of time this week, we'll start getting on those. So, on that motion, was there a first and a second? Yep. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed. That motion passes as well. Next motion of the evening, number 8. We took up number 8. We'll go to number 9 by Ms. Ross Sikowitz. Request superintendent furnish the committee with a budget schedule for March 1st, 2015 for the FY16 school year. Seconded by Mr. Leary.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the positives of my own children having snow days is I have had snow days. So I've had lots of time to dream up motions and get everything on the agenda. So this is self-explanatory, looking for a budget schedule for FY16. Hopefully, we're not receiving our budget just a couple weeks before the end of the school year, before the fiscal year, as we did last year. And hopefully this year, I'm thinking this year, we have a much better handle on our net school spending. And hopefully we'll have that far in advance. Thanks.
That we do. We've met it for the first time in 19 years. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just add in, and kind of hearkening back to some of the activities that we had as part of our budgeting process in the past. I know that in the past, the Finance Subcommittee and the Chair have hosted some public sessions, kind of to give parents, give staff an opportunity to come and talk about budget priorities prior to us going into the actual hearing. It gave the administration an opportunity to really put forth what the big priorities were so that the community was aware of it. when we were talking about some big investments and things along those lines. Obviously, in this budget season, we're going to have those when we were talking about the special ed changes and some of the other things that are going to be going on. So I would say, as you're compiling this, certainly working with the finance subcommittee and its chair to, in the past, I know we did a ton of them. It may just be something we want to do one or two kind of budget summits so that we can get that information out, going to maybe a couple different locations in the city to encourage parents and our full school communities to be part of those conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Further
Just-
discussion on the
And
motion?
it's an excellent
Mr.
idea.
Leary?
Like, Mr. Lang and I we're setting up an updated meeting that'll be scheduled probably within the next week or so. And it's definitely a good idea. We did it during a lot of the budget deliberations when we're making cuts. We can definitely, take the finance committee on the road again, which is very cool and very effective. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leary. Further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion passes as well. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Ross Sikowitz. Request superintendent work with the curriculum and IT personnel to establish an online partnership utilizing the district's social media capacity for the purpose of creating continued learning opportunities for our students in the event of snow days and vacations. Seconded by Mr. Gendron. Ms. Ross Sikowitz.
Thank you, Mayor. Having been home through all these snow days recently, I had the opportunity to observe other school districts who really utilize their social media very well and to a great extent in providing a number of activities for families to participate in. And like, for instance, the first day was snapping a photo of their child reading and sending that photo to, obviously, a district email address. And throughout the day, they would post photos of the children reading. I mean, it was a great activity. And all of those children who sort of were entered into a drawing for a $25 gift card to Barnes & Noble. The second day was a variety of word problems that were age appropriate or grade appropriate. So it really created these continuous learning opportunities for not only our children, but also activities that our parents could engage our children in on those snow days when everything's really kind of stagnant. And actually, another day that they did it was they had cool STEM activities where they put a variety of obviously grade appropriate science activities, little science experiments that parents could do with their children at home. So I just think it's, we utilize our social media to distribute information about, upcoming events, and I think that we could more fully utilize our social media avenues to provide further learning opportunities for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ross Sikowitz. Further discussion on this motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next motion of the evening by Ms. Scott, request superintendent develop a plan to implement a delayed start in lieu of school cancellation when appropriate. Seconded by Ms. Martin. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've received feedback from many residents, I'm sure my colleagues have as well, about why we don't do delayed starts in the city of Lowell. We've been told in the past they didn't work. And I just really wanted to get a report detailing to really qualify that statement, why they didn't work, if they could work in the future. I don't know if this is something a year from now that we start an education campaign, start literature and appropriate languages so that we can let parents know what a delayed start means. It's time away from work for parents, for working parents that really can't afford it. Our neighboring towns had 2 delayed starts on days that we had cancellations. And I'd just really like us to look into how we can make this work. Thank you.
For Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Gendron. I
I certainly understand the motion and understand frustration from parents, when we're canceling days and surrounding communities are doing delayed starts. Just as the superintendent goes through and reports on this, and I know you're aware of it, I mean, one of the key things that had kind of put this protocol in place was that we had multiple situations where children were dropped off at school and there were no adults there. Where, kids were dropped off at an elementary school, the doors aren't open, the kids can't get in. And parents just didn't know, and there's some education part of that, and there's, a lot of other aspects of it, but it was a huge safety concern when we'd have kids who were just at school sites and there were no adults there. And we had some scary situations. And I know we also had some, when we had done some early dismissals, we ran into the same thing where children were getting, dropped off and there were no parents to pick them up. Just because, our system is such that we're larger, it's complicated, with students getting dropped off and picked up in one place, dropped off at a babysitter site. It's very, very complicated for families, and I think we just ran into a lot of situations where we're really concerned for the safety of kids. I certainly, can support the motion to get some additional information, but just, in terms of kind of how we came to that decision, it was based on some very specific situations that had happened with some frequency when we tried it before.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martin. Mr. Gendron? Mr. Conway, and then back to the maker of the motion, Ms. Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Ms. Martin. I know that a number of times schools were delayed by an hour or 2 hours, and somehow the word didn't get out to the parents, and the kids did show up. And the problem is it had very few adults in the building that could monitor literally hundreds of kids coming in. So it was certainly a safety issue there too. However, I think that, there was also a language barrier, and I think that going back when this took place, it was going back a number of years ago. However, I think in the last 15 to 20 years, communication has certainly improved, and technology has improved in so many different ways. So I think to take a look at this and explore it and ask the superintendent to take a look and see if it makes any sense to do it today. See if the plan would be more effective today than it was, let's say, 15 or 20 years ago, because again, it wasn't effective back then. It was a safety issue. And I think that perhaps things have changed and it might be more doable. So I look forward to what the plan might be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand the concerns that have happened in the past, and I feel that we're in the education, business, for no better word. If we move forward with a plan to really come up with literature and educate the parents and the children, if the children know they don't have to come into school for an hour and a half, an hour and a half late, they're going to explain it to their parents. So I really think if we come up with a long-term plan, it doesn't have to I'm not looking for it to happen this year. That's definitely something that it would be really good for working parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Mr. Gendron? Excuse me,
Thank you,
Ms.
Mr. Mayor. Just curious, so I understand the difficulty with communication, but I don't know why that would be any different for a school cancellation. Don't we still run into the same issue if we cancel school? If it's a communication problem and parents aren't getting the message, aren't they still dropping their kids off? I guess I might, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the superintendent, why is it any different with a cancellation and a delay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The whole delay piece, we could do the teaching of it. It just gets down to the fact of when there's no school, the community, well, they'll have to stay home, you have to have a babysitter, but that hour and a half moving kids, what happens is, when you have a delay as well, it's not safe. If someone doesn't understand it, and we will work on that, a child could stand out in the snow for an extraordinary amount of time. There have been all these scenarios that happened with the time that we did do that, and it was challenging. We can look at that. we would probably do 1 hour or 2 hours instead of 90 minutes. You have 1,000 people who speak no English. Those are children. And so you have to realize that we have 1/3 of our community that speaks English as a second language. We can work on it, and we'd have to do, as Ms. Scott's saying, if it's for the future, we can do that. But I'm going to tell you something. If a kid's left on a side of a road for an hour and a half, it makes me sick. So we can work on it, and we can help to educate our neighbors, but we don't have those kind of communities that watch each other, and it's something that we find challenging. If you look at the cancellations, the urban systems very seldom do delays. All the way through, it'll be the Maldens, the Somervilles, the Lawrences that will not do the delay. But that's not to say that we can't start educating our parents in advance. It's a good time for us to do it, to say either no school or a delay. It'll be 1 or 2 hours, which also leads to really very bad attendance as well. So, there are a lot of other issues. I will study it, most definitely, and make a recommendation. But for any little kid whose parent goes off to school and says, oh, it didn't say no school, that stands on the side of the road, I'm telling you, I find it challenging.
Mr. Leary,
Well-
and then Ms. Ross-Sigowitz.
Just quickly, I think 2 points. One, I think, well, 3. One, we should look at it. I know, maybe 5, I don't know. We should definitely look at it. If I get rolling and it
Stop
gets
at
better,
3.
who knows, yeah. We definitely need to look at it. That's one point. Point 2, Lawrence just did it. And we should probably find out how effective it was or wasn't. And I believe the Lawrence doesn't actually have transportation or very limited transportation in their whole district. I think we should also focus on the high school. And there's another good motion here regarding the LRTA in the high school. I think one of the issues is a lot of folks who go to the high school, we talk about little kids and safety. We also don't think about the high school in terms of how many numbers actually go there when the buses are actually going in that area. That's a major factor. You got 3,000 to 4,000 students. Let's say 3,000 students, maybe 1,000 of them are using the LRTA. That's a significant number of folks. How does that impact with the 2-hour delay? I think it's a good idea to look at. I think after you've had 1 day and you're calling 2 days in a row, probably a 2-hour delay makes a heck of a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. There's definitely some impact that is, from a safety concern, but we should find out how Lawrence is doing it. Somerville isn't the same economic dynamic, but it's even more congested if you're looking per square inch in terms of that city. So I think we need to take a look at it again, probably not this year, but something that we need to, again, my point number 1, look at it again. Thank you.
That was 3 specific points.
But they were really good, though. I mean, they had to expound upon them. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Ms. Ross-Sigowitz?
Well, I just have just one specific point. And that is potentially when the superintendent sends out her survey, perhaps we include that aspect on that survey and get some real-time feedback from our staff and our parents. Thank you.
Further discussion on this motion by Ms. Scott. And the motion is to develop a plan to implement the delay in school cancellation when appropriate. Want a motion to refer that to superintendent for report and recommendation? All right. Motion by Ms. Scott, seconded by, Ms. Martin. All those in favor signify by saying an aye. And the opposed, motion passes. Next motion of the evening. Another one by Ms. Scott. I can tell you there's a little pattern here. Ms. Scott, Ms. Ross-Sigowitz, both children at home with a lot of snow days, a lot of motions. Next motion by Ms. Scott. Request superintendent work with the city manager to explore the possibility of the Lowell Regional Transit Authority providing additional stops at Lowell High School during set morning hours. Second by Ms. Ross-Sigowitz. Ms. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This, again, came from some constituents that had concerns about the morning hours for the LRTA. I don't know if we should amend it, possibly amend the motion that it's not additional stops at Lowell High School, but rather in downtown is the concern. And also not just for students, it's staff that use the buses in the morning to get to our schools and to our central office, which we've relocated downtown, and just residents in general. The streets are two-way downtown, so it might be easier now to maybe add additional routes. There's actually 3 bus routes I noticed. I went on the schedule and looked at it, the maps. The Highland bus route, South Lowell and Belvedere, that do not go through the downtown. They're outside, they go directly to the Gallagher terminal. The other routes seem to, go past the downtown streets, past City Hall and over to the Gallagher. So I don't know if there's some way to meet with them. It would be a service, it would bring people downtown. We're trying to attract business for downtown. That's my motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. Vasikowitz on that motion?
Yes, and I think also another question to ask is to assess their capacity. From what I'm hearing from students, our buses are packed to the point where it's kind of unsafe. Kids are standing on the bus. There are no seats, and they're opting not to take buses because of that aspect. And so even if it's a matter of adding another bus or two, based on routes, based on, if you have, say, 2 buses going out on the Pawtuckaville route, and those are packed, then maybe it's time to add a third, or, South Lowell, or, looking at what your ridership is on those routes, and perhaps fine-tuning the capacity that they provide. I can make that as a motion. I don't know if you... Thanks.
Okay. No objections to the make of the motion, just make that a friendly amendment to the... Right. Friendly amendment by Ms. Vasikowitz, seconded by Ms. Martin. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed. The motion carries. Entertain a motion to approve as amended by Mr. Leary, seconded by Mr. Gendron. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed. That motion passes as well. Could I ask Ms. Martin to take the chair for my motion?
Motion by Mayor Rodney Elliott, request that the superintendent provide an update and timetable for classroom space needs to handle students in grades 5 through 8 in the future. Seconded by Mr. Leary. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. The motion speaks for itself. I know we've had this discussion on more than one occasion. I just know that last night, as we're starting to get into the budget year, and we're looking at our capital improvement plan on the city side, just trying to gauge where we are financially for high schools, and we're talking about police stations. I just think I want to try to wrap my hands, or the council and school committee's hands, on where we are financially moving forward next year. And my recollection was it's certainly not the next school year, but the following school year that we're looking at this bubble, or this sort of significant increase of students coming out of our elementary schools into the secondary schools. So I know that we discussed it during the SBA process, but just in my conversations with the manager and some the financial team on the city side, where are we at? How much, knowing this is not one of our the priority project that we sent down, how are we going to pay for it? What is the cost going to go? Where is it going to go? Just even in generally speaking. So my recollection is that we're looking at approximately 12 schools, 12 classrooms in each of the middle schools, the Wang, the Robinson, and there were three middle schools, correct? Daily, right. So is that still the plan, still the need based upon our enrollment numbers? And I know you can furnish us with a report, but just generally speaking, what that number is.
Sure. Yeah, I'll be happy to put a report together for the next meeting for you. It's not a concern next year. It's the year after. So the bubble that's been working its way through the system, which is a pretty consistent increase at this point, is currently in the 3rd grade. So next year, it's about 225 students higher at grades K1, 2, 3 at this point than 4 on up. And part of our challenge is we have more classrooms at the elementary school level than we do at the middle school level. So our class size right now at the elementary school level is 22 to 25-ish across the board, and I'll have the report reflect that for you. At the middle school level, it jumps to anywhere between 26 and 28 on average already. So the concern is, in 2 years' time, if we put an extra 225 students into the existing strands that we have, the class size right off the bat, say in 5th grade that first year, would exceed 30, which is unacceptable per class. And then each year, you're going to add an extra couple hundred kids. So the original plan at the middle school level was to take a look at, you're correct, 3 of our schools, the Daly School in the Highlands, the Wang School in Pawtucketville, and the Robinson School in Centerville. And to actually, they're currently 6-strand schools, so they have 6 classrooms at each grade level, to make them 8-strand schools. So to add an extra 6 classrooms, 2 at each of those 3 buildings. And that would help keep the class size of the middle schools between the 25, 27, is what we were shooting for at that particular time. Now, the first year, for the 5th grade, you'd only have to find 6 total classrooms. You're then looking at an additional 6 the following year, 6 after that, 6 after that. So what we're doing is currently taking a look at all of our facilities, and this is something that we'll work on with our facilities, finance subcommittees. But we really do need to, for at least the year after next, try to identify at least 6 classrooms for regular ed students. Now, further compounding the regular ed class size issues are the need that we've had over the last few years, and continuing to add additional classrooms for our newcomer students, as well as special education students. We've had a significant number of students that, in the special populations, that we've been able to keep in district as opposed to considering out-of-district placements. But we're really feeling the pinch, both at the elementary and the middle school level at this point, for those classrooms. And they might be life skills or CSA classrooms in special ed, and then also the newcomers that we talked about. So that's just a continuing kind of burden on space, where our existing facilities are already overtaxed. But that is an issue, and I do plan on having some discussion this spring as the 16 budget starts to roll out. But we'll be having to make some real serious decisions probably next fall to have the right classroom sizes in place for the start of the 17 school year, a year later.
And generally speaking, so when we proceed to move forward, not this, but next year, a minimum of 6 classrooms for the 3rd graders that will begin to enter the 5th grade. What do other districts do, knowing that number will be static, it's going to continue, and you're going to need, essentially, if we need six classrooms in each of the middle schools, for 5th graders in 2 years, and then do you just do the whole layout? You create the whole footprint? I mean, I can't see us just, okay, this year we add more classrooms, that year we add more classrooms. Madam Superintendent, do you have experience in this?
Just 2 things that have come up very recently. This demographic is not just Lowell. You've read about a 3rd grade influx in Westford. We've heard different stories across town. At the urban superintendent's meeting last week, 2 superintendents are talking about converting their high schools to 8 to 12, which happened for a couple of years in Tewksbury as well. So, looking long-term, if those numbers, thinking about that resource and changing that demographic. Just in my hometown of Woburn, they're going to move middle schoolers, 5th and 6th grade. They used to keep them in elementary. So those kind of moves happen. Lowell already did that in their construction plan, but those, not that those are the recommendations now, and people have to think that way, but we have to think long-term to say, the high school does not have the population it has have. What do we do? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying that that's what districts do. And there have been several stories. Taunton was one superintendent just saying about the fact, yes, we'll have 8 through 12 at our high school now. I don't necessarily know if that's the best developmental, but space is space, and facilities-wise, that's what they needed to do. So it's an interesting time. Demographics are changing culturally and numbers-wise across the state. It's interesting. But those are the things that are happening.
So we're not the only district going through this with these numbers on both these numbers at both ends of the spectrum. Is it feasible? Does it make any sense to look at the other way, that we're keeping children in elementary school that should be going into secondary, i.e. keeping fourth graders or keep mixing fifth graders with, K through 4? I mean, are some districts doing that?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, all options have to be on the table, and
Right.
it's really an exercise that's going to take a good 6 or 8 months to figure out longer term where we want to go.
Okay.
And I think, the community's going to have to weigh in, the committee's going to have to weigh in about, what type of setups and structures we want to see in the schools, because there are the decisions, developmentally, what is best, physical space, what is best, what do you have, what is going to be the most cost-effective. We really don't, in my opinion, have the option of having the 5th grade stay with the elementary, because we're already maxed out at the elementary level.
And you've got another grade coming up after with newcomers and other issues. So moving forward, I guess that does answer my question. We need to plan for a minimum of 6 classrooms, not this year, not the next school year, but the following thereafter, having them in place and having more classrooms, a minimum of 6. So it just follows up to my question: Do you do 12 classrooms all at once and be prepared for the following year, or do you start? We've got to add classrooms somewhere.
Right. Yeah, is 6, and these are all things we're going to look at and we're
Right.
going to lay out for you. 6 classrooms, basically, at the end of the 4 years, is the equivalent of another school.
Right.
So really, at the middle school level, if our numbers remain consistent, we're looking at needing another middle school, which also came out of that OMR study.
Right.
One of the things that will be very interesting to see in March with the high school project, because the SBA actually did kind of flag this to us. They knew we had a middle school issue and we had a high school issue.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to kind of get their feedback on things. But I do know, and I think Billerica, who's going through the process right now, is also having this issue. And they are very seriously considering taking the 8th grade students out of their existing middle schools, because that actually then frees up 6 classrooms at each of the schools for the special populations and the increased elementary size in building their new high school to accommodate grades 8 through 12. And they're actually looking to kind of segregate the 8th and 9th grade students. We have a freshman academy clustering right now. You would do a similar program with your younger students, the 8th and 9th grade, and then they would kind of graduate up to the 10th through 12th grade program. So there's different impacts, but that's certainly something to look at.
I see.
But, we know we're going to need at least the 6 classrooms. If we stay within the existing buildings that we have, we may be back in the situation looking at modular classrooms again. Oftentimes with the modulars, they're built or configured in such a way that it's easy to, start with 2 or 4, and then you can add on, and you'd have your plan ready for 4 years out, but you could probably piecemeal it and add the rooms as you actually need them, instead of overbuilding and then not having enough students to fill them. But these will be things that we are looking at over the course of the spring.
I don't want to get into, I know we've had great discussion, we'll have more discussion about this, but just generally speaking, as we look at our finances and on both sides of the aisle, I just need to be able to communicate to the administration, this is what we have to prepare for in 2 years' time, and it'll happen in a blink of an eye, and there's only so much money, there's only so much levy, there's only so much money that we can raise from taxes and still be reasonable and still meet our obligations, and I think that we can do with creative ideas of and looking at other communities, because moving forward, how much can we afford, knowing we had the space crunch is a priority that we have to look at. So
Just on that, we are tracking over the course of the spring all of the school systems that are actually bidding right now for modulars to be put in place for September. We're tracking those bids just so that we have current construction costs and current bid costs, so that we'll know, we can put a multiplier on there depending if we need to, or 4 or 6 or whatnot.
Okay.
At least we're going to have real costs this spring as the contracts are awarded.
do you know just generally what we look at for or what they're going for now? And knowing
I
that
hate to
it
throw
could
a number
change.
out there
I know,
because
we don't want, but
it really, again, there's a lot of community input.
Yeah.
There are different grades of classrooms that you want to see. If you're going to have a classroom and we decide we're going to go with modulars, but we think they're really going to be in place for 10 or 15 years, you're going to buy a much more durable, more expensive unit up front. If we were thinking that there's potential for a school building project, so we're going to do something with our 8th through 12th grade, and this is a temporary solution, you're not going to go with the top of the line unit because you know it's only going to be there temporarily. But you can easily, if you want a real ballpark number, easily $150,000, probably per year, for a unit.
For a unit?
Yeah.
And we would need,
Again, there's some economy, if you buy multiple, because they come in pods, so, if you buy 2 or 4, it based on the configurations.
well, how many units would we need per school?
6. We're gonna need a minimum of a total of 6.
6 per school?
No, the first year, you're only gonna need
Okay,
2
right,
per
right.
school. So
Okay.
it's six total.
Okay.
But
I mean,
eventually, you're
that-
gonna need 24.
That gives the manager and myself at least some framework to work in, knowing
Right.
what we're looking at in the future, and that's, so I'm not holding you to that number, though there could be a little bit more left, but generally speaking, that's something we have to plan for as a city.
And we will be doing that this spring. So we'll definitely give you more information as we get the numbers.
Thank you.
Mr. Gendron?
Thank you, Ms. Martin. So I think this is a good motion and very timely that we keep an eye on this issue, and it's something, obviously, Mr. Lang, I'm sure you do on an ongoing basis, similar to a motion that Mr. Leary and I had on earlier this year to make alternate plans for what we would do with the increase in class sizes. So I actually think that this is a dialogue we should have on a regular basis at the facility subcommittee. Every couple of months, get together and give us the latest status from your point of view and, the direction that we think we're going. The nice thing about modulars is they give us some level of flexibility, right? We can, if we need the space here or there or someplace else, we have the flexibility to do that with the modulars as we get this figured out. So anyway, I just think I'd like to see, in addition to the report, I'd like to see the facility subcommittee take this up and meet on it on a regular basis.
Mr. Conway?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great idea to meet on a regular basis, because it seems as though there's a tremendous amount of information that you're going to be gathering, and it's going to be coming in piecemeal. So I think that when we get that information in, I think it's great that you share it with us at that point. Question I have through you, Madam Chair, to Mr. Lang. Now, you were talking about, and again, not holding you to the cost of those modulars. Is that to buy it or to rent it?
No, lease.
Just to
Leasing
lease
them.
it?
Right. And again, it's going to depend, the number is so variable because it's going to depend on how long your initial lease is. You're going to lease them for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. The first year that you actually bring them in, the cost is typically much higher because they have to come out and put footings in place, and you've got the physical build-out of the modulars. Then in, years, 2 through whatever you have, basically they're in place. It's very low maintenance for the company providing them, but there's a lot of upfront costs. So it's really going to depend on how you stagger the lease, but they would be leased. Usually there's a purchase price at the end.
Right, and when you're getting those updates on the number of students, when we're talking about in the 5th and the 8th, I think we're going to need the numbers, of course, at the high school too, because those numbers have gone down. And as one model, when you were talking about taking, I think it was Madam Superintendent, taking the 8th grade and putting them at the high school. And I think that Mass Building Association mentioned that with one of the school systems. And that, of course, would free up quite a bit of space in the middle schools. And yet, when we take a look at the numbers, that probably wouldn't be, it would be enough of space in the high school to handle that. Is that correct?
And
Well, if you took the 8th grade, just for argument's sake, and put them at the where the freshman academy is right now, and then you take the 9th grade and you put them back to the high school, which they've been there, for a number of years, and yet still put them into specific areas within the high school, like a subset of the high school, which was done in the past. I'm not saying it's the perfect situation. Would those numbers be, would there be enough of space to handle that?
yeah, and I'll do that analysis for you. It would be incredibly tight. Right now, you're looking at, based on the projector we have for the upcoming kids, over 1,000 kids
In the 8th
just
grade?
in the 8th grade. So to put another 1,000 kids at the high school as it stands now
Right.
would really be
So what do we
Probably
have there now,
overcapacity.
around 31 maybe?
probably slightly under at this point of the year. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank
So
you.
you'd definitely be going over 4,000. The other variable that's going to come into play is any kind of school construction at the high school, because that would give you no swing space whatsoever while you were actually trying to do construction. I think we'll have a much better idea, another month from now, hopefully, as to what's going to happen. And this is going to be a rolling issue for the next number of months.
Okay,
But I'll definitely keep the group informed.
thank you.
Mr. Gendron?
Thank you, Ms. Martin. So, I know at the high school now, they're already eating lunches in the hallways because there's not enough space down there in the cafeteria for them. So I think adding 1,000 students would probably be a stretch right now. But I think the MSBA was talking about if we were to build a new high school, maybe we should do it with a thought toward creating space for an 8th grade.
Correct.
And that was my recollection of the meeting, is that the new high school would consider that and bring those students in to alleviate our middle school problem long-term. But again, that's long-term. We're talking 6 to 8 years out before we can even, have that as a realistic option. So we need to have a stopgap between now and then. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Mayor?
I just have a quick question, just my own edification. Mr. Lang, Madam Superintendent, is these costs that we would have to absorb, we the district, for additional high schools, whether they're the modular or otherwise, let's just say modular, is that reimbursable at any, by SBA at all?
No.
Nothing. So anything that we do for additional high school, it's right out of our
For
pocket.
modular space?
For modular space.
Modular space is not reimbursable.
Anything that's not a priority project or that goes through the typical system is not going to be reimbursed by the state? Okay.
Correct, yeah. The modular project wouldn't go through the SBA.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
No other questions? A motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Last motion of the evening by Mr. Gendron. Request the school committee keep all interviews for the position of superintendent open to the public, and that the blue ribbon panel be used in an advisory capacity. Seconded by Mr. Leary. Mr. Gendron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we approach our interviews for the superintendent of schools, I wanted to put a couple of ideas that I was thinking about out there on the floor for us to maybe take forward at the personnel subcommittee. But basically, this is the most important thing that we do. The hiring and the oversight of the superintendent is simply the most important thing we would do. I want to make sure that we keep all our activity with regard to those interviews open to the public. We have nothing to hide. There's no reason why we should do any of it, in my opinion, behind closed doors. And I also wanted to make sure that we don't relinquish any of our authority that's been given to us by the voters in this very important task. So the ideas here are, first, again, keeping the interviews public. I think that that's something that should be, in the past has been private interviews, but I think now that we're using the MASC as a filter to sort of weed out all the unqualified candidates and only give us, a number that we agree on of qualified candidates, there's no reason to do another filter that's confidential. The MASC can handle any confidentiality issues, but I think that candidates need to know that if they're going to get forwarded from MASC to us, that those names may become public, and that would allow all of those interviews to be public. And secondly, the Blue Ribbon Committee, I am very interested in public input here. I think it's essential and important that we have all of these parties that would be contributing to this Blue Ribbon Committee, giving us feedback and input on the interviews and what they look for in a superintendent. However, I think it's important that that's something that they do alongside us. I don't think another filter is necessary. I would like to work alongside with this Blue Ribbon Committee to determine who is going to be interviewed and then, ultimately conduct those interviews. So, Mr. Mayor, those are some ideas I had, and I think that would be a good starting point for a discussion of how we would move forward in this superintendent search.
Thank you, Mr. General. We have Mr. Conway, then we have Ms. Martin.
First of all, when the committee, Blue Ribbon Panel, narrows it down to, let's say, 4 or 5, those meetings are in public. They're on televised, everyone sees it, people can come down. That's the way it's been done for, ever since I can remember. So I think that, my colleague certainly makes a good point that, we need to have it out in the open, and we need to have the public take a look at it. It is already out there. I'm not exactly sure the second part to this, so to sit down and get some advice or give advice or get some recommendations from the Blue Ribbon panel or work with them. I'm not exactly sure how that fits in here. I wonder if I can get further explanation on that?
Me?
Through you to, Mr. Gendron, response?
Sure.
to
My
make a motion?
intent was that the Blue Ribbon panel in this case, first of all, I think that the interviews that have been done in the past by the Blue Ribbon Committee have been behind closed doors. I actually, as a representative from the Friends of Lowell High School, participated in one of those interview sessions on one of the headmaster searches. And I think that there's no reason why those kind of interviews shouldn't be done in public. I don't agree with the Blue Ribbon Committee holding private interviews. And since we already have hired MASC to be a filter to make sure that we're getting only qualified candidates, I don't think the Blue Ribbon panel needs to act as a second filter. So I'm saying that what we do is that, yes, we use the Blue Ribbon panel to maybe help us devise interview questions, maybe actually participate in the interviews with us, but I don't think that the Blue Ribbon panel should act as a second filter to MASC before they forward us resumes. I think that when we get the resumes from MASC, we ought to look at those resumes and, as a school committee, determine who we're going to interview out of that pack, and then conduct those interviews together with the Blue Ribbon Committee. Actually, I'm trying to mimic the process that the City Council used in the selection of the city manager, which I think was a good one. They took citizen input, but they didn't rely on a citizen panel to tell them who they were going to interview. They determined amongst themselves who they were going to interview, and I think that's important for us to do as well. So that's what I meant by, working alongside with the Blue Ribbon Committee as opposed to using them as a filter. They would be used in an advisory, my suggestion is that they be used in an advisory capacity and not in a capacity that determines who will be interviewed.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Gendron. Through you back to Mr. Conway. All set?
I'm all set.
Okay, very good. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So just to respond to a few of the concerns, I think that we've certainly, begun this process with MASC, and it's already underway. As we talk about the role that the Blue Ribbon panel, it is important to note that one of the key things that we had during our open meetings that everyone was involved in was a discussion around the increased confidentiality that we would benefit from if we used MASC as our consultant as we went through our superintendent search. The process, and I know that we had discussed it at that point too, was set up so that individuals who are interested in becoming our superintendent, who are applying and going through that process, are guaranteed that they do have a measure of confidentiality when they enter into this process, so that they can manage their professional lives. That as many individuals who are applying for these positions are given that professional courtesy, that their names are not broadcast to the districts they're currently working for, other districts they may be in discussions with, and that the system is set up so that we can attract the largest number of viable and quality candidates. The move to make both rounds of interviews public will diminish the number of candidates we have. And that's we just need to be aware of that. If that's our course, that's what will happen. I will, to be clear, say that I am concerned about the trajectory of this process. We've had some pretty outrageous rumors that have been very freely disseminated throughout this city which can serve to poison the well of individuals who may be interested in this position. A move at this point to remove the professional courtesy of maintaining people's confidentiality, once again, will poison the well. I think if we want to derail the process, these are the things that do it. So, we've certainly had a number of conversations around the structure we wanted this to take. If it's the will of this committee to restructure at this point, I would recommend that we do it in conjunction with MASC. It has been a unanimous vote of this committee to work with them. If the choice is made at this point to discount what they've said and instead move forward in a different way, I would want for us to have that conversation in a way that would allow us to kind of have some, the benefit of their expertise. I would also say that timing-wise, it is going to be critically important that if this committee is serious about conducting a superintendent search, we need to get our ducks in a row, and we need to conduct ourselves in a way that will give us the best possible opportunity to bring a high-quality candidate and attract a high-quality candidate to this incredibly important position that we will all be relying on. So I would just say that if the consensus is to move forward with this new structure, either wholesale, if that's a vote that this committee is prepared to take to change that, that will be how we move forward. If there is an opportunity to have a discussion with whether it's through the personnel subcommittee or if my colleagues would like to do it someplace else, that is certainly fine. But I do believe we should include MASC, and I do believe that we should take good care to ensure that we're not taking steps, multiple steps at this point, to really derail a process that is critically important to our future as a district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. We have Mr. Leary, then Ms. Rosigowitz.
Okay. I think my colleague Ms. Martin made an excellent point about the rumors. I think that is a concern, that folks, if they hear something, believe it's true, and then folks won't believe it's a serious search, and you'll lose applicants that apply. And it's unfortunate that these rumors actually get out there. I think the motion itself, though, is to ensure the school committee has an opportunity to make that process better. I think we should have this in conjunction with the Massachusetts, Association of School Committees. I think we should have the dialogue at the next personnel school committee meeting. I think we should do everything in our power to increase the number of applicants, to show that we're serious about having the correct individual who's going to come on and lead the public schools. And I think folks that continue the rumors really put the district in jeopardy. I'm going to be honest with you, I almost had a motion that we should, and I may even still have a motion down the road, that we have in conjunction with our search, much like Bill Ricka did, also advertise for an interim superintendent in case we don't have enough qualified candidates apply. I held off at this point because we've gone this far in the process. I want to see the number of applicants that we have. I think we need to make sure it's a serious search. If we don't have an appropriate number of applicants, we should probably take a break and take a step back and look at an interim level. At this point, though, I think bringing it before the personnel subcommittee, having the discussion about whether it's in public or not, I think we did bits and pieces of both since we've had other superintendents. I remember Superintendent Augusta Scott, we did some internally with the Blue Ribbon Panel, but we also did them in public. It was a different weeding down of the process. I like the suggestion by Mr. Gendron that we have flexibility in this so we can increase the numbers in case there aren't enough folks that are applying, or folks get weeded out who we don't even know about. I think at the end of the day, it's our decision. I think it's the most important decision we pick, is picking the individual that's going to run the public schools. So I don't know if the maker of the motion would want to refer this to the personnel subcommittee meeting for additional dialogue. I think we need to put the whole process together anyway. We're almost finalized with that at this point in time. I think we can have there might be some compromises that could be worked out. I respect the point of view regarding the public aspect of it. Folks probably don't want to lose their jobs, and they want to have some protection when they're applying, and they want to know that we're serious about what we're doing. However, at the same token, we need to make sure that the school committee, who are the elected representatives of the people, are making the best choice. So I can see, and I appreciate the Mr. Gendron's motion in terms of having that a flexibility should it be called that we need to do so. So I guess if we could refer this, I guess I don't want to make a substitute. If we could just make an amendment to refer it to the personal subcommittee meeting for further dialogue and ultimately come to a resolution. I think that's probably the best choice at this point in time.
Ms. Ross-Sigowitz?
All right, so I think that Mr. Gendron's motion is well-intended, and I can't support it. Our process is already well underway, and for a whole litany of reasons, I agree with Ms. Martin. She made several good points. And, to further complicate the process, I think this motion only further complicates the process and it just puts us in a bad position. Thank you.
Further discussion on this motion? Ms. Martin, and then Mr. Gendron, and then Ms. Martin, if you could take the chair, I'd like to come
Sure,
down.
of course. I would just say that if it is the will of the body to refer this to the Personnel Subcommittee, what I would recommend is that we ask the superintendent to please poll to get a meeting as soon as possible, certainly encouraging all members of the full committee to attend, to be part of conversations, so that we could come to a as quick as possible, a resolution so that we don't stymie any forward momentum in terms of the search. Thank you.
Mr. Gendron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, a couple of points I want to make. I'm not going to give a number because I know that was backfired on Mr. Leary a little while ago. My primary intent here is to make sure that A, the interviews are public, and B, that we, the school committee, should determine who gets interviewed and who gets hired. And we want public input from that, yes, but I don't think adding another filter is a good idea. I think that in doing that, we relinquish the authority that we were given by the voters. I don't think this is derailing the process. I think that this is, the process can continue the way it is. This is an amendment to the existing process. We have not even started the process yet. I mean, we haven't even, received the applications yet. So I think to say that it's too late to take a look at our process is wrong. I'm certainly okay with having this discussion with the Personnel Subcommittee. I think that's kind of where I thought this would go anyway. But it's not an attempt to derail. And I disagree that it means we'd get fewer candidates. I do not think it would impact the confidentiality at all. In fact, I think it would enhance it. I think that we are very, very confident that MASC is going to maintain that level of confidentiality. When they forward us resumes, then we decide who is going to be interviewed. And when those people come for an interview, they have to be told, okay, you're coming forward for an interview, now your name's going to be public. And if they're not willing to do that, they're probably not that interested in the job at that point. And if they know they've made the final round for an interview here at the City of Lowell, they have to be ready to let their name go public. If they're not, then they're probably not a candidate for the job anyway. So I think that we can maintain that confidentiality all the way up to the point where we ask people to come forward for interviews. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I just want to, just to clarify before I take the big walk, the way the system has been set up for this search would be that as individuals went through the screening committee interviews, their names would be confidential. As we've discussed, public interviews happen with this committee, with the finalists. So as you're saying, the finalist interviews happen with this committee in public, televised. So that has always been the intention. The loss of confidentiality I'm referring to is that when you have a dozen individuals who have made it through the initial screening and are being reviewed by the screening committee, those individuals' names are kept confidential, and only the finalists, however many this committee would determine were going to be considered finalists, then all those names are public, have always been public, are expected in this round to be public. So that whole process has always been intended to be a public forum.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, it's just that we're adding another level of review here with MASC, so I'm suggesting that we don't need that interim session of interviews. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I will be brief because I think we've all spoken on this. I think we're all trying to put a good process, a better process in place, and we're all trying to arrive at the same place to get the best candidates. And I mean, I think this motion, I'm not sure, maybe I'm new to this, and I've not done this before. We've done it on the city council side. It's a little bit different with managers, I suppose, because there's not a blue ribbon panel, but I think it makes sense to invite people from the community to participate. But at the end of the day, those candidates that we do have MASC screening for us, but they work for us. And if we want them to do something, it doesn't mean we have to take their recommendation. We had their recommendation last week that we should be hiring someone from 180 to 200. I don't happen to agree with that, but we have that, you know, we adopted at least a wider, parameters, thank you, in order to attract candidates. That doesn't mean they're going to get hired. So I think that we're all trying to get at the same place. I also want to think at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the candidates that I'm going to select, and having a public participation process that is, we are beholding the public trust, and it should be open, and I know it has been. We want it more open, more transparent is better. And I always thought that this advisory, this blue ribbon panel was just that they weren't going to screen for us, but there still could be some candidates that are just going to have a discussion, have an open dialogue, and get an understanding of certain areas of their concern that we may not touch upon. So I think the motion makes some sense. It seems to be running concurrent. If we want to send it to the personnel subcommittee, I just don't want to get to the point where we're tripping over ourselves, trying to put a process in place that's going to slow down the process, knowing that we have to move in in somewhat of a timely fashion to get somebody in place before the before the superintendent's gone. So there's some overlap. So I think that what we have been talking about in the personnel subcommittee seems to be similar, or along the same track. Am I missing something here? I mean, are we trying to put such a process in place that's too rigid, but at the end of the day, that responsibility lies with us, and we make the decision who is going to be, after it's screened down, the candidate is screened down, who we're going to interview. I don't know.
Mr. Leary?
I guess I'm a little confused too. I don't think this delays the process. I think we've already selected the type of selection committee that we want to have. What we haven't done is simply give the number of folks we want them to select, the parameters, like the ultimate guidelines in terms of what we're looking at. So I think we still need to have, Ms. Martin, I guess in regards to having another personal subcommittee meeting to iron out those details. So in essence, really, we're not anywhere behind because we still need a personal subcommittee meeting. Unless I'm missing the point completely, that was what we were going to be scheduling shortly anyway. Whether we do this in public or not, I think we can hash that out at that same night. I think it's important that we have flexibility. I feel that is really important to make sure we get people believing that this is a real process. Again, the rumors that get out, people read them, they understand them, they look at it and say, you know what, this is a bag job. And they're not going to apply. And what it's our job is to make sure that we get the best individuals to apply for the job so we can have them compete for the job. And I think we need to have that flexibility in order to do that. I think right now we needed a personal subcommittee meeting anyway to develop a lot of what this committee was going to be reviewing. One easy example, and I said it earlier, is the number of folks that they're going to present forward to us. Again, I appreciate everybody's thoughts on it. I think right now what Mr. Gendron's motion is attempting to do, in a large part, is make sure this process gets the best number of applicants. And I think the personal subcommittee can iron that out pretty quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Back to Ms. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we can, this, just to be quick, the plan of the Personnel Subcommittee was exactly that we were already planning to have our next meeting devoted to coming up with what the charge would be for the screening committee. That would relate to numbers, that would relate to what we're looking for. That has been discussed and was part of the planning to do for our next personnel subcommittee. If this motion is referred as a point of discussion, we can include it as part of that discussion. If it's voted up or down this evening, then we've already dictated what that's going to be, and we won't need to move forward with the Personnel Subcommittee because it will have already been determined. I think if the maker of the motion is comfortable with the amendment that I think you had described, Mr. Mayor, of referring it to the Personnel Subcommittee for discussion, then we can do what, in all honesty, we had to do anyway, which is come up with the specific charge for the screening committee. At that point, we can have the conversation. If this committee wants those interviews to be public or not, that will be, that would be, in my opinion, the place to have that conversation. And perhaps we can, again, try to get through with some final decisions and be able to move forward.
I'm comfortable with amending the motion to forward it to the Personnel Subcommittee for discussion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Generman, second by Mr. Sigowitz to send this to the Personnel Subcommittee meeting for further discussion. On the motion, Ms. Sigowitz?
Yeah, I just want to add, I will support it in terms of sending it to the subcommittee for further discussion. Thank
Okay.
you.
Further discussion, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And the opposed, that motion carries. Thank you. That concludes the motions of the evening. We have a subcommittee report, we have a personnel subcommittee report, we have approval of the minutes of the meeting of Thursday, January 29th. Chair recognizes Chair Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. Luckily, we already discussed all of the findings and determinations of the Personnel Subcommittee at our last meeting and shared the decisions at that point. So tonight, we are only required to approve the written minutes as submitted.
Okay, motion to accept the minutes as a report of progress and placed on file by Ms. Scott, seconded by Mr. Conway. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed, those minutes are accepted. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Moving on to reports of the superintendent. The first report of the evening, back to school calendar year. Madam Superintendent.
Luckily, Mr. Mayor, this is just to show you if we maintained the traditional calendar, what our timelines would be if we kept everything the same. As you know, we're going to look for other information and input to redesign this. So I'm thinking that with the survey information, I will like to refer this to the next meeting. We could make a better decision. We usually do our calendar in March, so we're early. Just wanted to let you know that. But if you know, we would start school on September 1st. Labor Day's pretty late this year. And the last day of school, 185. If we had just 5 snow days, it would already be June 22nd. It would have been the 11th. So it's something for us to think about. So I'll bring you data, and we can review the next time.
Okay, entertain a motion to delay this report until the next meeting by Mr. Leary, seconded by Mr. Gendron. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed, that motion passes. Moving on to the next report of the superintendent of the evening, STEM Academy at Rogers Enrollment. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to take this opportunity to really advertise the STEM Academy at the Rogers School. We began that school last year. We have pre-K through grade 2 at the school building. If you're interested in your child getting to be in a school of inquiry where really there is a lot of science-based, it's coming along extremely well. I just wanted to let people know it's a system-wide school. We will be inviting 90 new kindergartners, but there's always transition, so there'll be room. So it will be pre-K through 3. And I just wanted to take that opportunity. We are advertising for our kindergarten, what is that? Thank you, registration, thank you. I'll take and so I tell you, it's a class of 2029, and if you want your child to be looking at science and technology, engineering, mathematics, it is another option for anywhere in the city. Just wanted to take that opportunity.
Very good, thank you, Madam Superintendent. Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much. If I could, I just, really echo those sentiments. We have great kindergarten programming across our district, no question. The unique aspect of the STEM Academy, and this has become particularly clear in their reporting to the Curriculum Instruction Subcommittee, is that there is really some exciting project-based learning happening at this school that is, I think, just extraordinary and a great opportunity for elementary students. So I would share the superintendent's enthusiasm about this. I have to say, I have made the recommendation to many parents who have asked me as they're entering the system. I've encouraged them to take advantage of the visitation days, include the STEM school in their visits to ensure that they get an opportunity to see what different options we have in the city. And I would certainly echo that here, that for all parents who have young children entering our district, taking advantage of the visitation days to meet principals and teachers and see the physical space that their children will be in, it is a great opportunity for themselves and for their children to have a great start with the Lowell Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Further discussion on this report? Entertain a motion to report as a report of progress and placed on file by Ms. Martin, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Next report of the evening, Shooter Protection Program. Madam Superintendent.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is in response to a motion made by Mr. Conway to ask me to meet with the chief of the Lowell Police and discuss the merit and feasibility of installing the shooter protection system for improved safety in our schools. And so you may know, just to remind you, that the shooter detection system was a company that recently installed Guardian indoor gunshot detection system in Methuen School that was in the news, and the sensors detect the sound of a gunshot and alert authority before even entering the school building. I did consult and meet with Chief Taylor. He did go to a review of this particular system, and he said it was a great product. However, very expensive for a particular piece that has to do with outside this gunshot piece. It's very interesting. We have a new mandate that's coming in, we'll be talking about. It's two-way communication systems to police officers. And so Chief Taylor and I spoke about the fact that we would refer this to our internal team that's looking at that. Mr. Conway, it may or may not be this product, but it certainly is something to be studied. So the motion is valued. This is one product, but as Chief Taylor and also the coordinator of the school resource offices, Sergeant Peasley, said that we should be looking at all of these and taking that into consideration with our system-wide options-based group, including the fire department, the police department, detectives on that department, our own staff that has made that enhanced response system that we've been putting into place. So we are looking at systems. You will hear about this again through the Student Support Service Subcommittee, but Chief Taylor, as always, gave me really very valued information, and he said, it may not be this product, Jean, but it will be something, because we would have to look at that and make that decision with our experts. So that's the response I got for your particular motion.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Mr. Conway?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Madam Superintendent, I appreciate the report and sitting down with Chief Taylor, because I think that this is obviously an extremely important to us. I know certainly as the school committee wants to make sure that our schools, the children and the staff are as safe as possible. And when I saw this product or system down in Methuen, it sounded like it was something that could be extremely helpful. And it's sad that we have to be discussing things like this, but in the world today, I think we need to be, we can't be complacent. We always have to be proactive, especially when we're dealing with security and safety. I think that what really caught my attention is that down in Methuen, it didn't cost the Methuen school system any amount of money at all, which certainly perked my interest. And it was my understanding that the company put their system in Methuen. I think it's something to get some publicity, and the fact that it didn't cost any amount of money at all. Now, you're telling me that it was through a grant. Is that correct?
Yes, that was that in that particular instance. And the superintendent of schools in Methuen, Dr. Scannell, is always challenged about if one school has it, how am I going to give this to all my other schools, so they're thinking that way. But this was an award, a grant award, federal grant award.
Well, is this something that we could tap into, or the police could tap into, this type of a grant?
That is going to be
Option.
included in the planning pieces, because we do have to have this kind of communication where we can have that information readily available. It might be this product, like I said, but it may be another, and we will study that with our experts.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the, to future reports dealing with this situation. Thank you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Further questions, discussion on that report? Entertain a motion to accept the report as a report of progress placed on file by Mr. Gendron, seconded by Mr. Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. That concludes the report section from the superintendent this evening. Moving on to the next section, we have convention conferences request. Why don't we entertain a motion to take both of these requests together? By Mr. Leary, second by Mr. Conway. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We'll take both of these requests together. Permission for the athletic director and permission for 8 student council representatives to travel. Motion to approve by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. Roll call.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Motion carries. Last section of the evening, we have communications. We have a communication on family resource fair. Madam Superintendent?
Yes, just to advertise, and we will do lots of this throughout the system, but this was something that was hosted by many different agencies that promoted our recreational programs, reading programs, summer programs. 600 families attended last year. It was really very fun. So stop by at the Rogers School Wednesday, April 8th, because it was families coming together to learn about what their kids could do in the summer. It was great.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Entertain a motion to accept the report as report or communication placed on file by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms. Ross-Sikowicz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Entertain a motion to adjourn by Ms. Martin, seconded by Mr. Lear. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Martin, or not. Almost got me. Entertain a motion to go into executive session. Let me read that. The purpose to update the committee on progress of negotiations, contract negotiations, second by Mr. Leary. Purpose was stated earlier. Reasoning for going to executive session would public discussion would be detrimental to the position of the city. Further discussion on that motion, then we will immediately adjourn from that meeting into open session. Roll call.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mayor Elliott?
Yes.
Mr. Gendron?
Yes.
Mr. Leary?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Ross Sikowicz?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
7 yeas, approved.
Thank you. We will proceed into executive session and then adjourn from that session thereafter.